We're going to look today at why emotional manipulation is so hard to explain to professionals. And I don't mean in terms of your words or anything. What I mean is getting them to hear it. So why is it hard to put into words in a way that they will understand what your child has experienced around emotional abuse? So you know that there's something going on. You see it in the way your children speak, the way that they behave, any changes that are coming from them. You know how your ex treated you. You know the emails that you get or the text messages that you get or the conversations that you have with them. That manipulation is constantly there. It's their go-to to regain control over any situation. But every time you try and explain that, it's getting lost. It's not being picked up. It's not being understood. You're not being heard. And, you might even think in a meeting that they get it. They might sit there and say, yeah, okay. And you might think that they're getting it. They're getting the seriousness of this. They're understanding what is going on. But then you read the report and it's like, well, we had a whole conversation about this and it's not there. Where is it? Where is that there? And it just doesn't exist. It's like the conversation didn't happen and you feel gaslit all over again because you thought that they got it. And yet it's like you never mentioned it. And so then did I say something? Did I imagine having that conversation? And it's very traumatizing and very triggering. And ultimately that can end up with you feeling like, oh, maybe it is me. Maybe I'm not saying it. And so it's about why that keeps happening. That's what we're going to talk about. And it isn't anything to do with you. Emotional manipulation, it's not traceable. It's an untraceable campaign. There doesn't seem to be anything on the surface that you can track. There is. But there's no bruising. There's, kids won't outwardly come out and say they're being manipulated. It's very rarely a single incident because it builds up over time. They wear you down and then they manipulate. And so you would have to track the whole thing. And if you start explaining all these little individual things that lead up to that, it's lost because they don't get it. They don't understand how that process works. But it is in the pattern that it happens. That's where all emotional manipulation happens, is within that pattern of not listening to the child's needs and the child knowing that actually it's not worth me bringing this up because I'm not going to get heard. The enforcement of their own needs, the parents' enforcement of their needs. So the child starts to learn, well, I've got to do what they want me to do. The positive and negative reinforcement that goes with that. So negative reinforcement when they don't do what that parent wants, and the positive reinforcement when they do. And that is the crux of manipulation. And once you've got controlled someone to that level, you've got them into that position, you can pretty much get them to do whatever you want. But those steps are the pattern. And like I say, it can be difficult to explain that. But let's have a look at the rest of this. So these incidences by themselves are not enough. They wouldn't meet a threshold for harm. You're showing the outward factor. So it's kind of like if you're putting a drop of poison in someone's drink every night, that one drop on its own is not going to cause any harm. But if you're doing it every night over weeks and months, it's going to build up in their system and it's going to make them very, very poorly. They're coming in at the bit where you're trying to say they're poorly, or they can see that this child is poorly, but you're trying to explain all the drops and they're looking for the big thing. They're looking for the big intake as opposed to the build-up of intakes. I hope that makes sense. I hope that analogy helps. So they're there. Professionals are there to assess that big event. They're there to assess, what's happening here and now, and look for that. Boom! This is why. Manipulation is the drip, drip, drip. It is all the control mechanism that goes in before that leads to a child being susceptible to being manipulated. And your ex has been doing this for a long time, so they're very, very good at it. They're very good at getting away with it. And you know that because you've been on the receiving end of that. You didn't just wake up on day one and be like, hold on a minute, this person's manipulating me. They wore you down gradually, but you didn't know that they were wearing you down each time. You might have felt something was a bit, but you didn't know until you were so far in that you were like, hang on a minute, I'm doing this, but I don't know why. Why am I doing this? So that's what the professionals are trying to look for. And that's why it's so difficult, is because we don't know it's happening until it's too late often, just like with the poison example. And your ex is really good at presenting themselves. They're good at presenting as being reasonable. They're good at presenting as being the victim. They're good at presenting you as being the problem. And also, there might be a trigger word in here, so just be aware where it's coming from. I'm explaining it as part of how they behave, not saying it's you. But they can make you look paranoid. You're not paranoid because you know the drops that are going in. But if you try and explain that, then your ex is deliberately setting you up so that you look paranoid by trying to explain it, trying to tell each individual incident, then that's exactly how they get you, because they use that presentation of you being paranoid and making stuff up about them for them to go, see? And that's why they're making stuff about me. But because this is what they do, it's all in their head. Again, I apologise for those trigger words. I'm just explaining to you what your ex is doing and saying. So they're really good. Your ex is really good at setting the stage for manipulation. And they'll do this to everyone. They'll do this to the professionals as well. So when you try to describe the incident and the incidences, they do all sound minor. When you show them emotion behind each one of those things, or the frustration that you're feeling because it's getting lost, it comes across as being emotionally unstable rather than being the result and evidence of everything that you've experienced and that your children are experiencing and that your concern. So as I've spoken about before, this is about describing rather than labeling. So rather than labeling things as emotional manipulation, we describe exactly the changes that you're seeing, those small steps of changes, because you're on the inside and you're living it. You're still got a wound there because you've experienced it, you're still experiencing it, and you're in a system that's doing it to you as well, and your children are experiencing it. So of course you're going to be very raw about this. So what we need to do is close that gap. So we need to be able to show that recognition is not enough. They can only act on what you can show them. So describe rather than label. The goal isn't to make them believe you. It's to give them something that they have to assess. They have to measure over time. So it's translating what emotional manipulation is into language. So you've got to be specific, behavioural, child-focused, and then document it over the time. So each drip needs to be recorded. When it happened and what your child said, what your child did, how they were presenting. So however many incidences with the date, and then this impact, this overall impact. So this isn't that the system is broken. The system isn't trained to recognize these things, but it's getting better. Long way to go. But for you, it is about presenting the pattern beneath the end result rather than just those individual incidences as minor events, showing this is where we're at. This is this, and this is, so it's almost deconstructing it. I hope that helps.